Okay. Um, this is the third class I'm giving this week since the war started. And each one is I've begun with just a couple comments. If you were in the other classes, you'll hear maybe just for the first 2 minutes a little bit of a repeat. But I feel I should still say something, acknowledge what's going on. The Navi uses the words Eitzarahi Yaakov. It's a very difficult, bad time for the Jewish people right now. While we are seeing horrific things going on, we're also seeing amazing acts of chesed, miracles, and I think part of the even things that we would never have expected, that the current administration in the United States being so incredibly supportive, unwavering support, not just lip service, but literally boots on the ground. So that's Mashiach times. The fact that countries who have castigated Israel for building a mirpeset onto someone's home that's going to be an obstacle to peace are standing shoulder to shoulder with the Jews and saying no, because never again is happening. Though I think the most powerful line I've heard since the beginning of the war, both from the president and from Lapid, I don't know who said it first, was that since the Holocaust, there's never been this many Jews killed in one day. And that's a very powerful statement. We have lots of things we have to do. One, of course, is to have the emunah, the faith, trust in Hashem. At the same time, we also have to be safe. We have to act responsibly. We have to acknowledge all the chesed that's going on around. I mean, I know anyone who's been involved in any kind of collection, where it's donations, food, clothing, anything whatsoever, has seen instant response. If you've seen the videos of people standing in line in Yerushalayim, giving blood out the door, around the building, down the block, it's mind-boggling, but not surprising, because Mikam Yisrael, there's no one like us. And the fact that we have a unity government, the fact that there's no protests in the streets right now. I'm not talking about the whole judicial thing. Protests against the government. How could you be in Gaza? We're doing terrible things. Everyone's united on this, because the pogrom, the ISIS actions, the Nazi actions, which there's nothing new under the sun. What the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, did to the Jews was done before them by the pogrom, the people by the Kozakim. It was done before them by the Crusades. It was done before them. Just keep going back to the beginning of time. It's just the same thing, just they use different equipment. And that's what Hamas has done, and they have shown their true colors. That I don't think it was someone here told me. Oh no, it wasn't. It was somebody else who lives in the neighborhood. Said I was walking home from shul. He said, I have a very left wing friend in the United States, and he says he's always pro the Palestinian. He said, wipe them out. So the people, and I have a friend, not Jewish, I've known for many years. She sent me a message that they're calling for worldwide jihad against Jews. I said, basically nice way, saying Boker Tov Eliyahu, that this is what we've been dealing with for dozens and dozens of years, that the world is just now waking up to. But again, I have to, I've spoken very briefly here and there about my political views about the United States and the current administration, but you have to give proper kavod to Biden, to the administration. Blinken's on his way here now. You can see it. It's not just standing like a puppet, like he usually is reading off the teleprompter. It wasn't, that wasn't fake. He doesn't have, I don't think he has the ability to fake that, to be honest with you. And I think that we have to really acknowledge that. Yes.
Like, it's unbelievable how many people are still writing their dad working.
Yes, okay. Let me tell you a story. I'll tell you one brief incident that happened yesterday in New Jersey. Just leave it. There's right. There's always going to be fringes. Always going to be the crazies, but it's not so little. Right. So yesterday, a person I know, I will leave her name out of the story, evidently someone went to the local dry cleaner in this neighborhood that's owned by Chinese or Vietnamese, and someone went in and they basically said the Jews are getting what they deserve. The next day, this woman went into the store with her video. And says, I want to just clarify, did you really say, no, we already checked it. We didn't really know what was going on. She says, you don't, she basically said, I'll make sure that your business is closed down because most of the business is Jewish. The owner's mother came running out of the store after her. So please don't. And this girl let loose screaming, like it just all came out. Even, you guys all want us dead. And it's like, this is where we feel this is a scream that's inside of us right now that the world's hearing. The world's hearing is world's waking up to what Hamas really is. It's not about the quote unquote Palestinians. It has nothing to do with peace. It has nothing to do with two-state solution. It has nothing to do with any progress. It has to do with one thing: dead Jews. That's their goal. And that the world is waking up. They used to make a distinction between the Hamas's military wing and their political wing. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. And all we can do, not all we can do, one of the things we do is besides daven and all, we continue trying our best to do what we can with Torah, spread mitzvot, spread the Ben Adam L'Chaver, which I've been trying since day one, try and tell people it's as critical, if not more critical even, than Ben Adam L'Makom, how we deal with our fellow man and how we are going to be able to move ahead with this terrible war and pray that they will come to a quick resolution. And kol hakavod to our current government for uniting on this. Kol hakavod for people, even someone like Lieberman saying, I'm 100%. What are you doing? I'm 100% for it. People step up. Yeah. Bernie Sanders. He takes someone like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders. I'd drop them in Gaza right now, let them walk around and see what they can find, where they can help. No, I didn't see that. That they shouldn't, she said they shouldn't go to pro-Palestinian rallies, probably because she's afraid they'll get hurt. Not because she's so anti. So, yes, one thing, yes. Yes, please do.
All my sons are in this class.
Yes.
And my oldest son is 35. He was in the Senate house.
Mm-hmm.
In 2009, he was in Gaza in the war. And he had some of the guys in his unit. He's in a special unit at something. And some of the guys moved out of the country, whatever.
Right.
35-year-olds. And well, they all came back except for two who are in touch with the Amuta, it's called Ored.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sending them, they didn't have ceramic
Vests.
because they're millennium.
Right.
So the guy said, just tell me what you need,
Yeah.
whatever, everything, whatever, because he couldn't come back, or I don't know what he's, the ones that came back are waiting,
Or they're
fighting, trying to come in, they don't have enough magic for
Right.
everyone.
yes, this is the story that's repeating itself in so
And
many
they're
places.
sleeping.
It's,
He's not in the picture.
yeah,
They're
sleeping.
Now they have like a day at the base to retrain or whatever, because they're being
Right.
south. They're sleeping between tents. I said, couldn't they give you probably like the
Wow.
sabas of the
Right, some
whatever? He's in the shower, the second day, and someone opens the door, and it's his teacher from third grade. Who's
Whoa.
like almost my age.
yeah.
And he said, Rav Shalom. And he said, Yona. And he came to volunteer.
Unbelievable. Just for people on Zoom right now, Susie Keenan was telling a story, very positive story about Nikim, and it's a story that repeats itself over and over. I know people who contacted me from the States. We have the money. Someone in Chicago, she raised $4,500 in an hour, and she wants to buy equipment and send it. How do I do it? It's like these stories are. That's what I was saying. Yes, the amount of chesed that's coming out is. And the guy who bought 250 plane tickets for people coming back, and there are more people flying back to Israel than leaving Israel. So good. Let's get started with the topic at hand. For those of you who've learned with me over the years, you know that one thing I find as a big failure in education in general is assumptions. A teacher walks into a classroom and assumes knowledge and moves on with that assumption. And as soon as that happens, the students are lost. Imagine I start to talk to you right now about astrophysics, whatever the word is, astrophysics. I can't even say the word. And assume I have some knowledge. And I start to explain to you that E equals mc squared means energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, which that's what it means. But what does that mean? Okay, I can't really explain exactly. Let's just say, let's assume for a moment I know it. You have no idea what I'm going to talk about. You don't even know what a number squared means. When I was in, I don't know why this sticks in my head. I was in fourth grade, and the topic of what the teacher was about to start teaching us was decimals. I had the book in front of me. I didn't know how to pronounce the word. And I asked, what are decimals? I didn't know what it was. And she starts to explain it, but I didn't get it at first. And it's like, there was not, give me a base, help me here, understand what, deca is 10, and then. So that's why I say, I'm not going to just jump into Pirke Avot. To tell you, okay, Pirke Avot is part of Mishnah, it's part of Chelek of Seder Nezikin. It's assuming so much background already, just that one sentence, that I really need to start from square one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace, it's going to take me, I'm sure, today and next time at least, trace the progression of Torah from Har Sinai up till today. Now, besides just saying, I could just send you a timeline. That's good. I actually have it in front of me. Okay, for my notes, just a timeline of things I want to remember to say. But that's not the point. For example, when I come to the point of whether it's today or next week, talking about the Shulchan Aruch, which we've all heard of, the Code of Jewish Law. But I say it's something like, okay, what preceded it and how did it become the Shulchan Aruch? And what do you mean there are 4 sections? What are they? I want to give you more depth so you know. And you don't need, if you want to try to remember the stuff, it's going to be on YouTube. You can always go back to it, write notes. Right now, just kind of like try to sit and absorb the information because there's going to be a lot of information. But I do want to show you, though, Adam Berger gave me yesterday, he has a book at home. I'm going to try and hold this up for everyone to see, just so you have a general idea. From the time of Adam Harishon, we put this up here. I'm going to go like this so it's to be seen on Zoom also, up until the 80s, 1980s. Okay, this is basically, I'm not talking about every single line in here because it's a lot of names and places, but it will be talking about a lot of the information that's on this chart. We'll refer to it a couple times here and there, I imagine. But let's do the following. I'm going to talk about how many years ago certain things happened as opposed to telling you the exact year, because it's actually makes a little bit more sense. We're going to go back 3,336 years. I'm going to start at Har Sinai. And at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, we got the Torah. And we all know that. But what do we get? It's a common question. What do we get? What do we get? So some will say we got the Torah Sheba'al Peh and the Torah Shebichtav. What is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law? What is Torah Shebichtav? Torah Shebichtav is the written Torah, which we know as Tanakh. But wait a second. How do we get the Tanakh? It's not even Nach. It's not even Ta. We're all the. Okay? Sefer Shemot barely started. So there's no Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim, there's no Navi, no Ktuvim, no anything. Yet there's an opinion in the Gemara that says, based on a pasuk in Zot HaBracha, it says Esh Dat Lamo, that it's you take the word letters and the word Dat Lamo makes up the word Talmud. That Moshe Rabbeinu was given all the Torah Sheba'al Peh. I'll explain what Torah Sheba'al Peh means in a minute. The oral law, the Torah Shebichtav, everything, including the stuff that's going to be in the Gemara and everything else. And what's the Gemara? We'll talk about that too eventually. But that was given to him at Har Sinai. It's a big, wide expanse of information. Let's just talk the minimum that was given to Moshe. Because not everyone agrees with what was given to Har Sinai. We all grew up and say, okay, in Har Sinai, Hashem gave Moshe the Torah. But we stop and think about it. He couldn't have given him necessarily the whole Torah because, like I say, it hadn't yet happened. If he did, doesn't that mean it's already preordained that the Jews are going to complain about this? Well, their DNA. But I'm saying we're going to have the problem of the Meraglim, the spies. We're going to have the worshiping the Egel HaZahav. We're going to have, if it's already there. So there's an opinion that all the letters were there, and as things came together, the letters became the words of how things occurred. I don't want to get into that now, but just let's talk about the basic. What does Hashem gave Moshe on Har Sinai? Torah Shebichtav, the written law. Example: you have to put on tefillin. You have to build a sukkah. You have to have a shofar. Well, it doesn't really say those things. What do you mean it doesn't say those things? It says, Basukot teshu shivat yamim. You should sit in the sukkah 7 days. Great. That's all the Torah says. It doesn't say what it looks like, what it's supposed to be. It doesn't say a word about schach. It doesn't say anything about, really, it says, it tells us about these things we're supposed to take on the first day of the Chag. What are they? Okay, it says about the Shel Rosh, it should be for frontlets between thine eyes. Wow. What does that mean? So that's the Torah shebichtav, the written word. Torah shebe'al peh is what Hashem tells Moshe and explains. He tells him, look, this is what tefillin are, this is how they're made. He says, this is what a sukkah is, this is how what you do with this is what the shofar is, how you blow, da, 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 da. So well, how does he remember all that stuff? I can't remember my own phone number. Okay, well, first of all, we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest Navi that ever lived, and ever greatest Navi that ever will live. Except for those idiots that think they know why God's doing certain things in the world now. They think they're the greatest Navi. So right now, let's just take it on face value that Hashem gave Moshe Torah shebi'al peh, the oral law, the explanation, the verbal explanation of Torah shebichtav, the written law. Okay, that's the basic, simplest way. Now we know when we get to the first chapter, the first parak, first Mishnah in Pirke Avot, and you're familiar with them, I'm just going to mention the first few words. Again, you don't need to see it inside. It talks about the Masorah, how it goes from one generation to another up until a certain point. It says the Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe Har Sinai, and he gave it to Yehoshua. Yehoshua gave it to Zikanim. Zikanim gave it to the who gave it to the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. No. What is Zikanim? Does that mean the Zikanim that Moshe put together in the desert? So let's this early part of the history. I'm only going to give you a little bit because I want to get to the meat of really what I want to talk about. So 3,336 years ago, we had the Torah. Yehoshua died 3,268 years ago. So in that time, the transmission of the Torah was from Moshe to Yehoshua. But how did it work? So we see the Gemara tells us he would teach something to Yehoshua, and then Yehoshua would teach it to others, and the elders would teach it to others, and it would. So this way, Yehoshua heard it multiple times as it was being taught and learned. But it was all transmitted, with the exception of certain things in writing, which did not look like our Hebrew writing at all now today, which was transmitted, was all done verbally. And that there were probably notes of something like reminders, like crib sheets and post-it notes, and so to speak, and post-it. The tablet did not mean a computer; it meant an actual tablet of stone back then, and it never died. They have to charge it. But we go through a period of time. Who are the Zikanim? Zikanim are the people that come in the time of the judges. The Sefer Shoftim, which lasts about 300, a little over 300 years time span. So Moshe starts the ball rolling, teaches to Yehoshua. Yehoshua gives it to the Zikanim. He's the one who, when you hear like Otniel ben Kenaz and other names of Shoftim, it is Yehoshua who taught the Zikanim the Torah, who then they passed it on to their people and their time period. We go for about 880 years further into history. We know that we have the whole story of the David HaMelech, or before him, Shaul, David HaMelech, Yonatan, Shaul. We come up to the time of Shlomo HaMelech. Okay, let's jump to there for a moment. We're talking approximately 2,500 years ago. In the year, let's say the year minus what? Let me see. Oh, here it is. Let's say about minus 800, approximately 800 years before the Common Era. Keep in mind, if you were to walk into someone's home at that time period, and still for another few hundred years, you wanted to see their Jewish library, what would you see? You'd see one scroll. That's it. There's no Tanakh yet still. There's Tan. There's Ta, Torah. There's N. Not even Na. Okay, you're still not finished with Navi. Beit HaMikdash gets destroyed, we know, at the end of Sefer Melachim Bet. It also is destroyed at the same chronological time of Divrei Yami Bet. Return from exile, Ezra and Nehemiah, takes place 70 years later. And pretty much after that, the story of the book of Tanakh is closed. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But again, there's no books. Why? Why are there no books? Why don't we know? Where's Rashi? Where's the Ramban? Where's the Shulchan Aruch? They haven't been born. They won't be born for another 1,000 years. Whoa, what about Jewish law? Verbal. It's still all being translated verbally. It says a lot about the Jewish people and education and their minds and memories. They were able to transmit. Now, I had thoughts over the years of how that actually happened. I have absolutely no basis for this. For any of you who've been to law school, medical school, whatever, any kind of school where you have multiple sections of things you have to learn for a particular mitzvah. So let's say I know that we have, for example, law school. I originally wanted to go to law school. I'm glad I didn't. But they have, let's say, there's torts and there's contracts and there's all these different sections. And now you're going to be taking this big final. Okay, no one necessarily can study deeply for every single one. So they do this. Okay, you're responsible for this section. You this. Then you have study groups. Okay, you teach us this, you teach us this, and then each one feeds off each other. And I think that may have been one of the ways that they did. But they still, one thing they didn't have back then are chumras. They didn't have all these stringencies. They didn't. And by the way, there was still no Ashkenazim, Sfaradim, Hasidim, no, none of that stuff. That's centuries later. This isn't the course in Jewish history. That's even right. And Hillel was more, and it says, I just was doing, it's funny you mentioned this, because just the other day, where I'm my Mishnah that I'm doing now, is that even though Shammai and Hillel vehemently disagreed on so many things, and one would have said that this woman's a married woman, one says she's considered not married, and this is tameh, impure, this is kavar, they didn't stop from marrying into each other's families. That's okay. Anyways, so we're still at the point now. Okay, so we're going to come to the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash again, about 2,500 years ago, approximately. They're still all being transmitted. There's no growth yet in anything of Torah shebichta. This I'm mentioning it very clearly. We had built the Shlomo built the second Beit HaMikdash, the first Beit HaMikdash. There is years and years of a Beit HaMikdash. There's unfortunately a lot of problems. For those of you who've learned Sefer Melachim, you know that was not a picnic, to say the least. It ends on a very sad note. Destruction of Beit HaMikdash. I'm right now on Project 929. We're almost finished with Sefer Yirmiyahu. And yesterday, Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Although in Yirmiyahu, it doesn't mention the Beit HaMikdash itself being destroyed. It mentions about what happened to the people. There's interesting reasons behind why maybe Yirmiyahu does not dafka record it in that chapter. Lamed Tet was yesterday. But again, we're still at Torah shebe'al peh, Torah shebe'al bichtav, and therefore there's only something in writing, which is the Torah and part of Tanakh, because the nevuah, prophecy, does not come to an end until early of the time of the second Beit HaMikdash. Malachi, the last prophet, last Navi, and it's early on in the time of the second Beit HaMikdash. And it is only then that we learn about what is now called Tanakh. The Torah is done, Navi is done, Ketuvim are done. But because we're Jews, there was obviously this disagreement on what would be included in Tanakh. What was going to be in the Torah, and in the Na was pretty clear, almost. Not everyone agreed. But the Ketuvim, that was where you have some problems, because I'll give you only one example because it's more recent. We just finished Sukkot, and Ashkenazim have a custom to read Sefer Megillat Kohelet on Sukkot. So I'll tell you parenthetically a funny story. It's still hard for me to smile, but whatever. I was just, thank God, at a program in Netanya for the week of Sukkot with AACI. Working is work. It's not work. It's not work. Okay, work, but it was a labor of love. But the teaching part was wonderful. And it's an Ashkenazi program, Ashkenazi davening, everything Ashkenazi. And there's a Sephardi minion across the hall from us. And I'm dying to go over there, but I can't because I'm responsible for the davening. So the last day, which now we are just finding out about the beginning of it, we didn't know it was a war yet. The last day, which is Shmini Atzeret / Simchat Torah, we're down to a relatively small amount of people and me. Just figured, okay, I'll see if someone will do some of the davening. I'll do some. I didn't daven for the Amud at all because being a Sfaradi, it's like I get confused in the Psuke de Zimra, Shacharit, Hallel, Hakafot, Lain, Gesh Haftorah, Geshem, and Musaf. So it was like God saying, gotcha. I think I did enough Ashkenazi davening to last the rest of my life in that one day. I mean, davening for the Amud. Anyways, so Beit HaMikdash is destroyed the first time. Jews go into Galut. They come back, rebuild Beit HaMikdash. Some come back. Many are too busy playing around the Chutz La'aretz. Some come back, build a second Beit HaMikdash. Early into the time of the second Beit HaMikdash, there's a decision about closing the Tanakh. What's going to be in the Tanakh? It's called in English the canonizing or canon of the Bible, the Torah of Tanakh. One question came up. They said, Bikshu lignos Sefer Kohelet. They wanted to bury the book of Kohelet. Why? Because it's a bummer and a downer. I mean, it's like nothing's any good. We're no good. You're no good. There's a Havel Havalim Amar Kohelet, that everything's just Hevel. It's just vanity. That's nothingness. Mashayahu Sheyeh. Whatever it was, that we will continue to be. And it says, En kol chadash tachat hashamesh. There's nothing new under the sun. But it did give us a good song. To every season, turn, turn, turn. In the 60s. That was a good song. And they make, just parenthetically, the reason they decided to keep it in the Tanakh was the one pasuk saved it. The second to last, the penultimate pasuk, the Tanakh of Kohelet says, Sof davar kol nishma et Elokim yirah sotav shmo kizeh kol adam. I know what I've said so many times, that's why I say it by heart. That the bottom line is, we're here to serve Hashem. That's our job here. In spite of this, you may think you're doing the same thing over and over and that you're going through the motions. We're here to serve Hashem the best way we possibly can. That saved the book of Kohelet. There are other books of Tanakh or of Nach that were wanting to be not included. They finally came to a conclusion by the end of time of Malachi the Navi, because it would need Nevuah to make that final decision. Malachi is dead, he passes away, and Tanakh is closed. So the 24 books of Tanakh are 24 books, and in the 24 books, we have one book called Trei Asar, which is Aramaic for 12, and in English, why it's called, always been referred to as the 12 minor prophets. There's nothing minor about it. Okay, there's one book in there that's one parak. The entire book, anyone remember which? Vadia, one parak. Okay, some Zechariah's multiple prakim, Hoshea's multiple prakim. Anyways, so now we've come to approximately, let's say, 350 BCE. Sorry, 350 BCE. The second Beit HaMikdash is still around, and the Nevuah, Tanakh is closed. Again, no books on your shelf. When I say book, again, I just mean there would have been scrolls, if anything. No books on the shelf. Come along the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. Now, in the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, which I'm not going to go into depth because we're going to go into much more depth in the first chapter of Pirke Avot. For those of you who were in the Navi class, when we were doing Ezra and Nehemiah, we did some background on them also. It is during that time period with Malachi, and also after that, we know that Mordechai from the story of Purim is in part of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the council of the elders, is when, again, they finished, I said, the Tanakh. It's when they composed the Shemona Esrei. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that time period, which we will talk about. Along comes the end of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, and that happens about 2,300 years ago. Who was the last person of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah that survived? He's mentioned at the beginning of Pirke Avot, and there's a train stop named for him. In English, he's Simon the Just. Shimon HaTzadik, right? Shimon HaTzadik, who was one of the few people buried in Israel, which we have Masorah from the time he was buried. He's actually in that burial place where my kids used to live, right behind the kever. That's the end, and then comes the dynasty, the Chashmonaim, and all kinds of other fun stuff and quotes, and the Herod comes along. Herod is responsible. Herod's known as Herod the Builder and Herod the Crazy. He was insane to some degree. He's also responsible for so much of what we picture the architecture of Israel, whether it's the wall, not the higher part, but the lower wall of the retaining wall around the Beit HaMikdash, which we colloquially call the Kotel, which just means the wall. You know, we only see about an eighth of that wall outside. The rest is underneath. But it goes all the way around. There is, that is Herod. He rebuilds the Beit HaMikdash after knocking down the puny one, quote unquote, that Ezra and Nehemiah time build. And after that, he makes an expansion. He builds what you see in Hebron, what you picture the Marat HaMachpelah, the building above it. That's Herod. He builds Herodion, his winter palace. He was built like crazy. Was he Jewish? Was he not Jewish? Is subject to debate. Was he half Jewish in quotes? Whatever it is. So then we jump ahead. We know that the Beit HaMikdash, second Beit HaMikdash, was destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era, 69, 70, right around there, a little less than 2,000 years ago. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you now a few minutes of background on how we are about to go through a massive overhaul and change of Jewish history. There are certain points in Jewish history where we can look at as a vector of a change or a shift, a seismic shift in Jewish history. Whether it's the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, especially the second one, because since then till now we don't have one. Whether it is Galut, Jews being sent into exile, there are massive shifts. The Holocaust coming into more modern times. But when we come to the year approximately of 170 of the Common Era, a man named Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who died in the year 200, makes a massive, life-changing, life-altering decision that to this day affects us. He said as follows. Now, for those of you who've ever been to or know of Beit Sha'arim up north, so if you've not been there, there's a requirement. You have to, not now, but you have to go. That's where Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi is buried. And the best thing to do is there's a little bit of a, not even a mountain, like I'd say a mountain above the sarcophagus where he is buried in the inside the mountain of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and you sit on top and learn Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, which we're going to see what he did with what is Mishnah and what is his decision, you take his work and you learn it near his grave, not next to him, but on top. So what did he do? He said, look, it's been a long time. Remember, we said that it's 3,336 years ago when we were given the Torah on Sinai. Let's just say simply Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Shebichtav, the oral and written law. It's now about 1,300 years later, no written word except the Tanakh. And he said, we have a problem. The Torah is being forgotten. What was the catalyst for that? Keep in mind that the Jews have just gone through a massive trauma of destruction Beit HaMikdash. We right now are going through a massive trauma as the Jewish people. What's going to be? Literally only God knows. Hopefully it's going to be quick. I think so, but hopefully it'll be quick. They, on the other hand, not only did they have the slaughter of Jews, they also had the complete dispersion of Jews. Really, to this day, we're in Galut from that. Since then, the Shekhinah, all the things you've learned over the years, everything you hear and read about on Tisha B'Av, and all the videos you see, we're still suffering from all that trauma. So what happens is that the Torah, with the center was the Beit HaMikdash, in spite of the fact that near the end of the time, the second Beit HaMikdash, things were going down tubes for the Jews, politically and religiously and all. Nevertheless, Torah is being forgotten. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi quotes the pasuk and said, "Eit lasot lashem hefeiru toratecha." It's an emergency situation. We have to do something radical. That's not what the pasuk means literally in English. And I'm going to do something that's never been done. And I'm going to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh. I'm going to write down the oral law. That's a contradiction in terms. Oral and not in writing. Right? So, which is hard for people to understand. What do you mean there's an oral law and a written law? Everything's written down. Yeah, now, but until about 1,800 years ago, it wasn't written down. We didn't have anything in writing. It was all verbal with a few little notes being passed from generation to generation. Now, if you decide, as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Judah the Prince in English, anytime you see the name in Mishnah, Rabbi means Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Interestingly enough, Rabbi means Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. The Rebbe today means we talk about him in terms of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zecher Tzadik U'Kadosh Livracha, the Rav Yosef Dov Levi Soloveitchik. So it's interesting how certain generations take a certain title, and we know automatically who that person is. So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, or Rabbi, does this massive thing. So if you are a Rabbi and you're going to write down the Torah Sheba'al Peh, you have a massive job ahead of you. What are you going to, how are you going to, first it has to be organized. We also have to have like the information that we need. I have to make sure it's accurate. So it's a massive job. So he decides to divide the oral law into 6 sections. In English, Hebrew, it's called the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, or in short, Shas. Shin Samach, the chupchik, Shisha Sdarim, the 6 orders. So if someone says they learned Shas, they've gone through Shas, it can mean 2 things. They've gone through the entire Gemara, which we're going to not get to today, which is the next generation, or it means they've gone through the 6 sections in the Mishnah, which is itself, it's a 4,500 plus chapters of Mishnah, is its own feat. So he divides it into 6 sections. Now, if this were a classroom, I'd write this all on the board, but I'm not. I'm just going to mention to you now. The 6 sections are Zraim, which means seeds, which has to do with mitzvot that have to do with the land of Israel, starting with brachot, and then going through like Peah and Maser Sheni and Bikurim, and Chala, correct? So you have Zraim, Moed, which has to do with holidays, Shabbat, Pesach, and Eruvin for Shabbat, Nun, Nizikin, Nashim, Nashim. You have this thing that have to do with not just women, but marriage, divorce, vows. Next is Nizikin, torts. There are damages between people. You hurt somebody, you did damage to their property, you found something, a lost object, what are you supposed to do with it? Kuf, Kodashim, which are things that are holy. It has to do with korbanot. And the last one is Tet, Taharot, which has to do with Tuman Tara, ritual purity and impurity. There is an acronym. There's an acronym of those words, of those titles. It's Zman Nakat. Zayin Mem Nun, Nun Kuf Tet. It's not just an easy way to remember it, it's also a charge to us. Zman means time. Nakat is Aramaic for to take. Take the time. Take the time to learn Torah. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was giving us in the initial letters of the sections he set up a hint. It's not a book that sits on your shelf. Take the time, take it off the shelf, learn it. Problem is that even though he put them into specific sections and he put the information in there, it's not in a state where we could say, okay, how do I build a sukkah? Okay, let me look it up in halachot of sukkah. Here's how we build a sukkah. He did is he has all these mishnayot, all these different, each one is called a mishnah, plural mishnayot, mishnayos, is to tell us like, okay, Rabbi Eliezer says this and Rabbi Yehuda says this. Rabbi Shmuel says this. There's a lot of comment, a lot of putting together of what each person said, but not necessarily always coming to a conclusion. Some of the things are left completely unclear. For example, I'll make one up. You didn't say this. Don't forget Tuesday morning next week, you have to take that blue bag, put it in the blue desk on the top of the mountain, only when the sun's at its normal spot. Stuff like that. Like, what? What are you talking about? So the next generation will discuss this when we get to it next week in Gemara. But right now, what I'm leaving you with is this point. We have just gotten to the point where Torah shebe'al peh, the oral law, is now written down in 6 sections. 6, and what I'll do when I post this, I'll put a little summary of the Zman Nakat on there. What happens next? Okay, this time period is time period of the Mishnah, which he finished around the year 200 of the Common Era. The rabbis of the Mishnah, the time of the Mishnah, are called Tanaim, not Tinaim. Tinaim means conditions. Tanaim, a Tana is a rabbi at the time of the Mishnah. We'll explain to you next week why. And next week, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to pick it up from the time of the Mishnah, move into the time of the Gemara, the Talmud. Just as not a spoiler, but what we're going to do, Pirke Avot, is in this part, is in the Mishnah. But we need to go much further into history before we go back to the Pirke Avot. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
There's an excellent series, 5 books written by